Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. I'm your host, Victor, and on this podcast, we are going week to week, diving deep into some new TV series, and hopefully introducing you all to some recommendations along the way, something related to what we're watching. In this episode, of course, we're on the cusp of Thanksgiving. Apple TV has kindly released the latest episode of Pluribus early, but this was a very inconvenient time for me to be recording, with a co-host, I should say. Not inconvenient for me personally, since I was actually on furlough this week anyway. But Sona indeed was called into jury duty. So it'll just be me breaking down this latest episode of Pluribus, an episode called Got Milk. Some quick show notes right off the top. Of course, if you are continuing to watch Pluribus, we are 5 episodes in with this episode. 4 more episodes to go. Make sure you subscribe so you know when those episodes drop here on the feed. Darren and I continue to watch Welcome to Derry here as well on the podcast, and have begun our rewatch of Watchmen, the Watchmen comic book adaptation on HBO Max, which dropped 6 years ago now. And an incredible rewatch if you have not visited it in a while, and definitely something very curious to watch now in this new context, considering the story about masks and about police brutality and about the limits of control and overreaching and the negative consequences of those attempts at control. All things that, of course, are themes of our culture now. And amazing that that series came out in 2019. I have not revisited it since then. And then just in the wake of the BLM movement and the fight over masks during COVID and the January 6th riots, and just how the cultural backlash has become even more pronounced online. All these things that seem to be predicted in that series of TV. So we will be rewatching as we wrap up this season of Derry in parallel, those 2 HBO shows. Subscribe so you know when those episodes become available, as I mentioned. I've been having a lot of interesting conversations with all of you via email, mostly about Pluribus and some of my theories on the direction the show might be headed. If you'd like to reach out to us, needssomeintroduction@gmail.com, or post a comment on our YouTube videos or on Spotify. I always get around to responding to all of them. Forthcoming on the show in December, of course, we have Season 2 of Fallout, the massively successful video game adaptation on Amazon Prime. We're approaching the end of the year. It's award season coming, and I'll help you catch up on a lot of the gaps you may have on those forthcoming award season contenders. I'll actually have at least one here later in this episode. And in January, a slew of returning shows just on HBO. The Pit is coming back for Season 2, a show we'll definitely be covering here on the podcast. Night of Seven Kingdoms, the new Game of Thrones adaptation, also something that we'd probably be dipping into here on the podcast. And in mid-January, the 4th season and possibly final season of Industry, a show that Darren and I have already earmarked to be our next coverage after the Fallout episode, or I should say season, wraps up. This was all in the HBO announcements this year, and later in the year, they also have House of the Dragon Season 3 coming out. They have the Lanterns series, which is intriguing. I'm not 100% sure it's going to be a success, but intrigued by this Green Lantern series. And of course, Euphoria just wrapped up recently and will also be premiering in the upcoming year. That's just on HBO. There's many other platforms to discuss as well. And of course, this being Thanksgiving weekend, there are many streaming deals, so if there's anything out there that you've been wanting to catch up on from our feed or just to fill in some blind spots for the year, here's some of the streaming deals that are out there right now. You can get Disney and Hulu for $4.99 for a 1-year subscription. This is in the United States, by the way. I'm not certain if all of these deals are international for our international listeners, but do check them out. Speaking of all that content coming to HBO Max in the next few months, if you act now before December 1st, there is a $2.99 a month subscription for HBO Max. This is, of course, if you have not been a previous HBO subscriber. All of these are, so make sure you use. I do this all the time, by the way. I always take advantage of at least one of these streaming deals on Thanksgiving. And if I have used a previous login with a previous email address, I use yet another email address or one of my wife's email addresses, or Sona's email address, and we share a subscription, something like that. But definitely take advantage of these. So yeah, that HBO Max deal is $2.99 a month for a year. That is with ads. If you want the non-ad version, it's more, of course, but still a huge discount. Peacock has a $19.99. I just sent this one to Sona because I know she was wanting to watch something on Peacock. Peacock has a $19.99 deal for the entire year, which is quite a bargain. If you like some of those reruns, not 100% sold on. There was a couple of shows this year, by the way, on Peacock that I watched, including Poker Face. Also, the John Wayne Gacy miniseries was very good, kind of the antithesis to a lot of these more over-the-top serial killer series that we've seen. So there's some good stuff there, but mostly their content. If you love watching The Office reruns, for example, there's your one-stop shop for that. And $19.99 for the year is not bad, especially since you also get some of those big movie premieres. That is the first window for release for Universal, I believe, owns them. So those are some of the big ones that I noticed. And of course, check for any other streamers you may be curious about. I'm almost certain that they'll have some kind of streaming offer for the next week or so. Of course, Paramount Plus, another big one. I believe their annual subscription right now is 50% off. So yet another opportunity there if there's something you wanted to see on Showtime or on Paramount Plus. If you love watching Taylor Sheridan shows, although he's leaving Paramount Plus for $1 billion. I forgot to mention this last week, by the way, but I heard from multiple folks out there that indeed Carol was watching a box set, a DVD box set of The Golden Girls, and the box was visible on the coffee table. Yes, a detail I missed, and thanks for letting me know. Oftentimes, the only time I hear from audiences is when I make a mistake here on the podcast, but I appreciate it nonetheless. Although I'm pretty sure if she picked up the phone and had asked to watch the entirety of The Golden Girls on her local broadcast network, she probably could have gotten that delivered to her and maybe, hey, run Seinfeld and then Friends. I'm not sure she would have taken advantage of that, just to go speculate on that 1 second more, because she has been so adamantly against taking full advantage of these amenities that have been provided to her. But, of course, in this very episode, we see that she thinks she's been truly calorie restricting here and taking advantage of these amenities. But indeed, no, because this week, all of those luxuries have disappeared. A very intriguing aspect of this metaphor that's being explored here, the idea that she wants to do this all on her own, and then only to realize just exactly how dependent she is on this hive mind. As the episode begins, an episode called Got Milk, if I haven't mentioned that already, we pick up directly from last episode. Carol has nearly killed Zosha, or Zosha's body, and immediately we start to feel that there's the vibes are off here, to say the least. Incredible world building here, just in general, that in such subtle ways, just seeing these people with their tattoos, like not in hospital garb, all working coordinated, and just illustrating yet again, Carol is just this outsider, as they have all, like, they barely speak. They barely need to speak. They only need to speak to her. They, of course, have an internal coordination happening. This is, again, like bees in a hive. And the way that this is so subtly revealed, and also the fact that we have just acclimated, as has Carol, I would assume, to having people all the time. My wife works in a hospital, for example, and there are just so many conversations happening at all times. I can't imagine what it's like with all the doctors and people picking up phones and having cross conversations and talking to the patient and talking to other doctors and talking to the families, and all the machines beeping and alarms going off, like you see on a show like The Pit, for example. And just the constant noise and constant chatter and having to split apart all this noise. And then that this hospital is running. Then again, they have very few patients, of course, but this hospital is running seamlessly and quietly. And all of this is conveyed very subtly with just as a matter of fact, we have just acclimated to it as watchers of the show as well. But as I mentioned, the vibes are different. I love this detail, by the way, that we now know that it wasn't just crying here. The way the show is conveying this very cleverly. The crying wasn't just happening localized. It was everybody, all the hive mind on the planet was crying, please, Carol. And of course, we get this confirmation because halfway around the world, Lakshmi's son was crying. And in such a tiny scene, just a fascinating revelation, we get this information that, of course, this was happening as a global phenomena. But more importantly, what is going on in Lakshmi's mind here that she still is personifying that you made my son cry. Don't you dare make my son cry again. She must have noticed that like everybody in the street was crying at the same time. The fact that it is a fascinating little bit, to me anyway, a little piece of observation about the character that they're able to see this happening to 100 people in front of them or around them. But then just look at their child and say, you made my child cry. she cannot accept, I think, the fact that the son is completely absorbed into this hive mind. So this denial is really fascinating because it's just another way, yet another way, that you see that people are dealing with this in their own way. Carol, of course, adamantly opposed to accepting that things will not go back to the way they were. And here we have Lakshmi in denial saying like, oh, it's exactly like it was. See, my son's right here. Without the realization that, of course, that she is speaking to this unified intelligence rather than any kind of differentiation of her son. I love that that Lakshmi calls Zosha her chaperone. Lakshmi has a point though, right? Like, I mean, everybody's just trying to find their way to deal with this circumstance. And she asks, are you mentally unwell? And it is very possible that Carol is mentally unwell. It also is possible or certain that Lakshmi is not truly dealing with the circumstance. So all things are true at the same time. Then we have this really fascinating sequence in which, first of all, like I mentioned, everybody's giving her the cold shoulder. So I'm like, well, here's some differentiator here in the way that this hive mind behaves. And some of the online chatter and even some of the conversations I've been having with listeners here indicate that there's something more nefarious going on here with the hive mind. My personal interpretation of this all is that they truly do have or believe to have Carol's best interests at heart. And they do want to unify her because they think it's what's best for her. And they can clearly see that she is struggling, of course. Now, the philosophical question there, of course, is does that allow them to impose this on her, even if they consider it a kindness? And my opinion of it myself is no, that it's not okay. But I do think it is interesting to understand that they really do perceive that they are doing what's best for her. In many ways, it is like the arguments I have sometimes with parents that are incredibly overprotective and constantly managing their child and managing their child's experiences and constantly checking in with them emotionally and being this overly parental figure, overly controlling figure, but wanting what's best for the child. Like, of course, long term, they're like, no, I want to make a resilient child. And I always ask the question, it's just like, well, are you making a resilient child when you are sanding off all of the rough edges of all of life? And that's a question that the show asks in some ways. So I think yet another metaphor you can lay on top of this. But as a parental figure, they need a little break from Carol. Or maybe more importantly, the metaphor that I think here is, as we see on the show, that everybody has vacated the hospital. They're not just vacating the hospital. They are vacating the city. They're giving her that space she asked for to the nth degree. This is incredibly offensive, by the way, that Carol, who probably, every single one of these episodes can be seen as some kind of metaphor that's being imposed. Of course, in the first episode, Carol's the one who's left out when the whole entire world goes into this kumbaya land. And all of a sudden, you're the only one that doesn't perceive the great thing that's happening, and you feel like you're the outsider. And if you've ever had that kind of experience where everyone around you, someone in your family, for example, sees this thing as being an incredible, isn't it great that this thing's happened? And you're like, what do you mean it's great? And you're the only one who feels that way. Feeling like you're the only one, you feel a little crazy. You feel like you're the only one who's not seeing what is clear to you, or you're the only one who is seeing what is clear to you. And somehow you're like, how do you guys all agree on this thing that I'm on the outside of? This is probably something that Carol has had multiple times in the way, for example, she can't accept the success of her books. It's not the right kind of success. Now, here she is with honestly never being able to find a sounding board for her, the way she thinks, even when this pocket of untransformed, ununified people is found. And of course, in the previous episode, we found out about her experience going to this conversion camp, yet another metaphor. Again, she's having this worst nightmare of her life of trying to be forced into a box she doesn't want to be in. And of course, the experience here in this episode is the metaphor of thinking everything's just going okay. You know, you could be very demanding, you could be very uncomfortable, but of course, whoever you're in a relationship with, they're cool with the way you are. And then suddenly being like, no, I need my space. We need to take a break. I can't deal with this anymore. And feeling like, what do you mean? What do you mean you need a break? And Carol's having that, and she doesn't even have a shoulder to lean on because all of humanity, the entire world, is taking a break from Carol. And if she's ever had insecurity about possibly losing a lover, or maybe some insecurity she had in her relationship with her wife, well, this is the most extreme representation of it you can imagine. And for me, these are the two, from a plot perspective, the convenient aspect of this is that she gets to have her Nancy Drew moment of having full access to investigate any lead she wants to, because the place is completely abandoned. By the way, if it's very expensive, one very expensive thing to do, of course, is to have to populate a location with lots of extras, which of course we've seen throughout the show. Another expensive thing to do is to clear out any indication of humanity, of civilization. No people, no planes, no cars, no nothing. And of course we see that in this particular episode. Speaking of extras, before I forget, I did another little bit of trivia. The mayor that she calls out last week, who's working to repair her house, is the actual mayor of Albuquerque, Tim Keller. So back to the plot again. Carol is sleeping in the hospital waiting for Zosha to wake up, see if she can recover. By the time she wakes up, the place is completely cleared out. A pretty incredible sequence here of just coordinating all these people yet again. I love all the variety of all these faces, all these body types, just people you don't normally see as extras in a lot of these shows. And we see this time lapse. Carol's a very heavy sleeper. And when she wakes up, of course, Zosha is gone. Everybody is gone. Everybody. And she calls the operator, of course, and there is a recording. They will not even communicate with her. This is the safest bet for them, apparently. She's getting screened, and any request she can make, she has to hear this same recording, very explicative, that their feelings for her have not changed. We just need a break. This very much is the kind of handling conversation you have during a semi-breakup, or maybe the first phase of a breakup. And it is very funny that we have to hear this same recorded message over and over again. She should request that they change the message, because she does have to wait for the full message each time. She goes to the roof of this hotel. Is that I thought the hospital roof would be higher, but I guess it might be higher. This hotel, Crown Plaza Hotel, nearby the hotel. The hospital, I presume. And this great visual of just seeing these cars moving in opposite directions. It is really like something out of a cartoon. She turns to the left and all the cars are heading that way. She turns to the right. They're all heading that way. And then the highway in both directions are totally clean. While she slept, the entire city has emptied out. Oh, by the way, of course, this is 8 days now. Last week we were 7 days in. We are now 8 days in. She has spent about half this time in the hospital when Zosha's recovering from the grenade blast. And then, of course, she almost killed. It's like a weekly attempt on Zosha's life. And this last week was, but not this week, luckily. She didn't have a chance to kill anybody this week, or try to. But this week, Zosha got a break, but still in recovery after being drugged, of course, and already recovering from the grenade blast. Carol gets back home in her police car, puts on her makeup, writes herself a script, and prepares to use that camera yet again to put all her discoveries down and have them distributed to the 12 remaining others like her. Do they all have playback for these cassettes? I forget exactly what her instructions are, but shouldn't we put them on multiple formats, Carol? So Carol gives everybody the rundown, if they're even receiving these tapes, which I assume they are, even though I guess, this is an ambiguity here that the show, I'm sure, will explain at this point. But if they do indeed see her as an existential threat to what they're trying to do they actually not comply? The rules of how accommodating they are is still unclear. I also don't understand why they're programmed that way, considering the assumption, I would think, of this mind glue technology would be that everyone would be absorbed. So then why would you be overly accommodating to the particular outliers? I guess it's a way to bring them into the fold, but then you also empower them to undo what's happening. So I'm still ambiguous as to the rules of this, and is this potentially a flaw in the way this unified consciousness works? So important details, of course, she wants everyone to know. They can't lie. And most importantly of all, this can be reversed. And of course, this is, in a nutshell, the main theme that's being explored here. Peace and love is great. You may all love that you have this. You may all want to believe you want to be part of that, to be included in that kumbaya, peaceful community that you're on the outside looking in at, envying it. But maybe your individuality, that thing you're surrendering, is more important, and maybe you don't value it enough. Of course, to her, it's the most valuable thing she perceives in herself. And again, this is a really interesting theme that's being explored here, especially through this character. Someone who her individuality is so important to the way she defines herself, who can't imagine that others don't feel that way, even though she apparently is truly in the minority. And in her mind, of course, these people who were unified couldn't possibly all be okay with the way things have gone, despite the fact that she hears that they are truly happy with the circumstance. And I do question whether that is 100% true or not, obviously. But in this small sample size of the people she's met, they all seem very cool with the way things are going and would love to be unified as well. So it really makes her feel like she is truly an outlier. Of course, she hasn't spoken to Manousos yet. Not a proper conversation, obviously, other than some swearing back and forth. But that, of course, is going to be very important to the way the show progresses. But of course, in all of this, there's also this exploration of the fact that she is not autonomous. She needs all of these other people to do for her. There's a certain level of privilege and luxury that she's used to, and she still wants that and all those positive aspects of this without, of course, that loss of self. Of course, the greatest irony of this whole entire show is that it's not that this is Carol's worst nightmare. Carol's worst nightmare is being unified with these others. But this circumstance in which she can have the entire world at arm's reach and yet gets all the amenities that she hopes for is honestly kind of how she wants to live her life. She wants to have these experiences. She wants to be left alone. Of course, she had a partner. She had a wife who made all of that more bearable. So honestly, if it was her and Helen dealing with this, she probably would be loving every moment of it. But since she doesn't have things 100% the way she wants them, she is pushing back. And of course, with the fact that she wants all those amenities, just doesn't want to lose that sense of self that she has. And she does know that this hive mind is working day and night, literally, to try to incorporate her to be one of them. She wraps up her disc here, or cassette, I should say, and has her instructions. She wants them sent to all the remaining ununified folks, translated if necessary. She just says make 12 copies of this. It is very possible, now that I'm just thinking about it, this would be very funny, if they literally are just making copies of these tapes in this format, and she's not even thinking about the fact that how will they play that back? They're going to get this cassette. I mean, if I got this cassette in the mail, unless I was really fascinated or really wanted to find out what is Carol Sturka talking about have to say to me at this moment, I'm probably not going to request a camera that will play it. Of course, if they say, hey, can you bring me a camcorder that plays this type of tape and that it's for the US region, because regions are different, of course, for this content as well. I'm sure you could get it, obviously. They can get it to you, right? They have unlimited resources. But that is another hurdle. At least I'd be like, can you put it on a flash drive? Anybody can watch it on a flash drive. Carol, you got to be a little more tech savvy here. By the way, that's partially facetious. I do not expect Carol to be tech savvy based on what we see here. And then, of course, I love the insult of this. Can you please do this? And they're like, of course we can, but via drone. They do not want to have any interactions with her. And Ray Seahorn has this great expression on her face, just as kind of, when the drone flies it away, just kind of this accepting, all right, I understand. They don't want to have any communication with me. Okay. But of course, she obviously is craving this is another really interesting thing about this character, by the way. She obviously craves that human connection, whether she'll admit it to herself or not. So this is very upsetting to her that probably in her past, she's been very abrasive and relationships have not gone well. Personal relationships and romantic relationships, familial relationships, I'm certain, have not gone well for her, given how prickly she is. So this outright rejection from the entire population has got to be smarting. And whether she'll admit it or not, she does need that personal contact. She needs to see people on a regular basis, speak to them. And Zosha, of course, was a surrogate for creating that experience. And of course, now she's truly isolated. She gets what she wants to say, hey, I'll go to the grocery store by myself. Who's stocking the grocery store, by the way? I think that food is rotting there at this point, but maybe they'll go and replenish it when in the middle of the night so that they'd run into her. And then that night, coyotes? Are they coyotes out there? Some kind of feral canine shows up and starts digging through her garbage. Okay, Sona and I brought up for the first time last week this whole idea of what is happening with animals, right? The rats in the lab had been infected originally with this. Can it spread? It obviously does spread from rats to people. Can it spread from people to other mammals? We saw that with COVID, for example, right? It did spread from one animal to another. It does seem to require more intimate contact, but as we saw that quick transmission from kissing in the pilot episode of the series, but we also saw that you can seed the air with this, as we saw with the airplanes hovering over Albuquerque and that widespread infection. So if mammals can catch this from people or from the surfaces when it was dispersed through the air, then at least some percentage of the animals are affected. Anyway, we were very curious to see, are all the animals responding the same way? And we have some piece of information as to whether the show has forgotten to include this, or maybe it tells us something about how this virus works, that it is that unified mind only works within a species, for example. Because what is up with these coyotes? They are not friendly to Carol, but perhaps friendly to each other. They're hunting in a pack, but hey, that's what dogs do anyway. They're rummaging through garbage. There's not that much garbage, of course, so Carol's one of the few places they can come and look for scraps of food. And this made me think about something else. We haven't on this show, as far as I can remember, we have not at any moment on this show seen any of these others, the unified hive mind, walking their dogs and playing with their pets out in the wild. I mean, I go outside on a nice day and all I see is people walking their dogs. So whether the dogs have been part of the hive mind or not, what does in this world, what do they do with their dogs? If they are constantly trying to make Carol happy, are they trying to, I know people who run their lives around their dogs. So are these people just continuously doing nothing but actually trying to entertain their dogs constantly? That's one possible scenario. But I don't even see the pets. So did they free them? Because think about it. Yes, when you free the zoo animals, then they want to go out into the wild. If you let your dog out the door, your dog just wants to come back inside. They just want to hang out with you. So how is this happening with pets? And has the show considered this at all? I would love to see. Maybe there are just a squad of folks who are playing with the dogs all day long to keep them happy. But of course, your pet wants to be with you, whether you are a hive mind or not. The dog primarily has emotionally attached to you specifically. That actually would be an interesting way to investigate this whole entire the limitation of being another or being differentiated. But maybe this show just doesn't want to deal with that. But it would be cool to find out what is happening with the pets. It might be another aspect of this of how this virus works that could be explored through that. It would be funny if they have to do that exactly like how they have to do everything that Carol wants. They're so eager to please Carol. Where the dog's like, I want to go for a walk. So you're like, oh, you want to go for a walk? You want to go for a walk? And then all of society is just constantly taking their dogs for walks. And that becomes the focus of all of culture. These dogs, on the other hand, wild dogs. Carol scares them away with a golf club. She asks to have the lights be put back on, all of the lights, thinking that might be a way to keep the dogs away. Lights probably, dogs probably assume that if the lights are on, that people are around, and of course that usually keeps them away. But after days pass, and there's still no movement around those houses, those animals will become more bolder. Of course, the next morning, she needs to get that garbage out of there so the dogs don't come back. And this leads to a hilarious sequence, which, by the way, was one of the teasers for this show. They can come pick up her garbage, but it has to be less than 17 pounds in separate bags. Carol, of course, finds that good enough. It's close enough to 17 pounds. And of course, we see the drone come again. Carol, all you need to do is take the tray and the lid and put them separate, and none of this would have happened. But it is a very funny sequence that leads to the drone barely able to get this off the ground, gets caught up in a light post. I love how the blades open the bag, which I knew was going to happen anyway, and all the garbage comes showering down. Definitely not what Carol was hoping for. Of course, we see here Gilligan's love of process again. We see every detail of how this goes wrong, and very much in line with his sense of comedy as well. Him and his team, of course. He has a whole team of writers. But if it's really satisfying to see someone very proficient at something, executing at a very high level, like a heist movie, like I've mentioned before on the podcast. It is also very funny to see a very, very complicated plan fall apart. And then this is when the whole Nancy Drew aspect of it, as Carol's now disposing of her own garbage, she looks in the recycling bin. It's very interesting, of course, still that she wants to separate the garbage from the recyclables. Very funny. This is where she discovers that there's a lot of cardboard recyclables, all milk containers. What is in these milk containers? I'm still not 100% sure here. So, by the way, reach out to me if you have your own theories. A couple questions I have. One is this milk mixed with something else? Of course, we'll get into what that is in a moment. Or is it just the other substance? I think it's in the milk. Second of all, do you think it's flavored? Because that would be interesting. We see that there are all these different flavors. So do these, different aspects of this hive mind have a preference for flavors? That would be an interesting wrinkle in all of this. I wouldn't be surprised at all, however, that it's just one flavor and they just have cartons for everything, right? So they just shove everything into the cartons that are available. But it would be curious if someone says, oh, I want the chocolate one. Huh? Well, you want the chocolate one. Why is that? Why don't you all like the same flavor? And again, very much process driven. We see first her exploration of the garbage cans and then nothing but these milk cartons. It's pretty much all they seem to be sustaining themselves on. This leads her back to the dairy where she sees some residue, this red residue that apparently would be the chemical that's being added to this milk or replacing it completely. And working her way back, she finds these piles and piles, these sacks full of this white powder. The crows are eating it and they're not dying, so that's something. But what is this powder? And of course, that's the mystery for the rest of this episode. She's no chemist, but she does do her due diligence here with a little, check the pH, 7.1, which is almost exactly water. So it's neutral. I like her revelation that this is neutral. Yes, it's almost exactly as neutral as water. She makes another video and shares her new discovery. It has this yellowish color when it's mixed with water. It has the consistency of oil, but it's a very thin oil. By the end of the video, she has a meltdown. Is anyone even seeing any of these? And of course, she deletes the recording and starts over. The drone comes again for her next recording. It's all she can do is try. And these wolves, these don't look like coyotes, by the way. Wolves? Do they have wolves out there in Albuquerque? These wolves, when she comes back out with that golf club, they come back, by the way, should definitely mention this, of course, that they're not back there for any scraps of food. They're now out there to dig up Helen's body. They know there's something under the ground, and this sends Carol into freak-out mode. And, by the way, these dogs are not part of the hive mind. They are growling at her. They are very antagonistic. She runs the police car, does not know how to release the shotgun. An interesting conundrum here. A, she never figured out how to release the shotgun. And B, I guess she didn't think she would ever need to use it against the person and probably wouldn't have anyway. But hey, animals exist, my friend. She should have thought about that earlier. She can't scare them away with the shotgun. So what she does do is drive the car right through her backyard and scare them off that way. She sleeps in the car the whole entire night with the siren blaring. She probably could have gone back in the house and just left the sirens on, but hey, she probably just thought she would wait him out and fell asleep. And then she has quite a day. This is a lot of activity for her. She goes to the Home Depot or Lowe's nearby, gets these slates to make her own patio. She spends a whole day making a patio. I like that. She would have had to have gone back and forth quite some time. If you've ever tried to do this, put a couple of slates in the cart. I don't recommend it, by the way. And definitely don't put as many as you can, because you get exactly what you see here, where the car's bottoming out the entire time. But the 4 or 5 slates she could carry each time obviously required many trips back and forth. And we do see this progression of her laying the stones as the day gets later and later. She's going to be very sore the next day. I'm sure this is a lot more activity she's had recently. And I do like this. Some people might feel that this is a very slow episode, and I'll save my final judgment here for the end of the episode. But you see, again, this tenacity that Carol just sets her mind to something and she doesn't stop. And she goes back for even like when she's 80% done, she probably has done enough for the day. And she's like, well, they're not going to be able to dig her up. And, I haven't finished covering the entire area, but I can go back for some more later in the week or something. That's good enough. Carol's going to finish this. And that is very much indicative of her character here as well. And of course, that this memory of Helen that she's trying to preserve, literally. And she paints something, I guess something that she did, and she leaves it out on the patio for Helen in some way. We don't see this painting. I do wonder when we will see it. What's the payoff going to be of seeing this painting? And she settles in that night thinking that her investigation is over. But then, in the middle of the night, she suddenly thinks, hold on a second, this bag has a barcode on it. Good job, Carol. And she does the very first thing she does is what I would do, is like, let's run this down to the supermarket and see what is on this barcode. Whatever it is, not something they sell at the supermarket. But are there any other bags in the supermarket that have this same look? And maybe they come from the same place. Well, turns out the dog food is in a similar bag. And what's the address for that dog food? She goes to that facility. Next hop, backwards through her investigation. And in this very spooky, it's funny that this was the actual, I think her with the flashlight was the image that previewed this episode in the TV app. And immediately I was like, oh, she's doing a little Nancy Drew investigation. And in just one image, they kind of capture the tone of this last section of the episode. And she discovers something under a tarp that shocks her to her core. And cliffhanger ending for next week. Okay, here's my speculation. I just came up with this in this very moment as I'm saying this out loud, but I may have solved all the questions I asked here in one fell swoop. I've seen online that there's some speculation. What are they doing? Are they eating bodies? Maybe they needed to kill those billion people to, have enough spare parts to feed the rest of the population. I could be 100% wrong on this theory. I always have a theory, and this one might be 100% wrong. But I'm just thinking about all the questions I asked. Where are all the dogs? Every time I go outside, all I do is see people walking their dogs. And it would be very in line with Gilligan's sensibilities of having, let's say that they're making this out of dogs. Maybe they're making it out of dogs. And of course, we see dogs in this very episode, and those dogs hunt in a pack. So, of course, this is a pack of humans that are working collaboratively. Maybe there's something in dog brains that are making them behave this way, and maybe they are mapping that onto people. And of course, the last part of this is he loves a pun. So could you imagine that what's in those bags? Dog food. Okay, that is one of the most crazy plot points I've speculated on before, but I am very curious. There might be just enough there to be a true theory. And dogs, of course, right, love all the things I outlined here, right? Dogs love to please. They are working as a group, collectively. So who knows? Maybe feeding dog brains to these people are making them act more like dogs. All right, as for this episode, this is, again, another one of these. I've mentioned this in previous episodes, that so many of these episodes are almost schematic in how they map onto a particular interpretation, like a thought experiment that's being played out to a ridiculous degree. And the whole show behaves this way, but each one of these episodes almost becomes a different metaphor that's being explored. And we see it again here with this, the whole world has broken up with you, which is very, very funny, by the way. Just the thought that the entire world has broken up with you is very funny. And maybe how people feel sometimes when you lose a relationship, and through that relationship, you lose the extended friend group, and you lose, your certain hobbies that you had, things that you did together, and how you lose everything all at once. And obviously that is part of what's being explored here. And it's a very funny way to conceptualize that. And the show has done that over and over again, each episode practically taking one idea of this as a metaphor and then exploring it in a very thorough way. And of course, we continue this investigation. And I don't really like the fact they ended on a cliffhanger. Not a huge fan of that in general. I would have preferred the reveal and then an explanation of it next week. But of course, hey, cliffhangers work, right, for drawing people in. And if the show, by the way, continues to do just this, I would complain. I think if all we get are more of these kind of here's another metaphor for what's going on here, and we just have a little more of the investigation, and that becomes the entire season, and we get no kind of big plot twist, and when I don't even mean a plot twist, like something unexpected, but some kind of the stakes need to change, I would say, at the end of the season. I think that's something that doesn't necessarily, that's kind of a differentiator for me as to, I'm okay with a season of show ending on a cliffhanger without explaining everything. But I do think that a season of show needs to successfully be about one aspect of the story. And then at the end, the stakes need to change. So to talk about something we were just talking on the podcast recently, of course, we covered Alien Earth. And that is a whole season of show that ends on a cliffhanger, but hasn't really changed the stakes. It's just a continuation of the same story. And if you're just continuing the same story, then I don't feel like there was a reason to segment that into a season. So I do think that as entertaining as it is to see Ray Seahorn explore different aspects of this very well realized and very deeply explored version of this Invasion of the Body Snatchers variation, that I do need there to be some logical endpoint to this discovery, to an explanation of it, to her partnering with other folks, and the stakes to truly change. Like, do they have a way to reverse this? And do they reverse it, or are they about to reverse it as the conclusion of the season? And then, of course, some of the things I speculated on before. How funny would it be if Carol is able to reverse this globally and somehow makes everybody on Earth hate her? And I had speculated that might be a direction the show goes. And here's a tease of it, possibly, where everybody's already on a break from her. But how funny would it be for her to reverse everything and only for people to be really angry at her? And then the next season of the show is that she is now completely alienated from the rest of the human population, because then she puts on the news and the world has gone back to the way it was before. And every single news broadcast is scientists working on putting it back the way that Carol Sturka broke, that she is responsible for this. And, she needs to have like a squad of guards around her house for people who are furious at her. And she can barely walk outside by herself without feeling threatened. And of course, the very guards who are surrounding her are also furious with her as well. One possible direction the show could go in season 2. All right, so have a happy Thanksgiving for anybody who is celebrating. I do not expect to have another episode later this week, given the holiday and our travel schedule. But Darren and I will be catching up on Welcome to Derry next week. The Chair Company will be having its season finale, and we'll be talking more about that show that we've been watching and covering here over the podcast. A show that has been renewed for season 2. And we will begin that rewatch of The Watchmen as well. We already recorded that conversation, but honestly, just no time to publish it here on the feed, given travel considerations this week. And of course, also getting this episode so early. And of course, if you have alternate theories to anything I've said here before, or if they are, I'm not listening to other podcasts, I just don't have the time, but there are many of them, I know. So if you have a favorite theory that's floating around through some of these other channels or online or through one of these forums, it's a very popular conversation on Reddit for sure, let me know. And we'll discuss it here on a podcast. needssomeintroduction@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you soon.